So we're delighted this morning to have representatives from formerly the Electric Power Board, now EPB. So Joe Ferguson, the chairman of the board since 2000, a graduate at University of Memphis, did graduate work at University of Tennessee and University of Georgia. So probably got two flags on your car, Joe, I guess. 50 years in the manufacturing business here in Chattanooga, and then his tenure at the Electric Power Board since 1991 and chairman since 2000. And the president, David Wade, a local Chattanoogan, a graduate of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, started out as a line helper, working on line crews, and is now as the president and the CEO of the Electric Power Board. So thank you all for being here. Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. David and I have certainly looked forward to being with you today. I'm going to do just a little background and then let David take it from there. Let me just tell you a little bit about EPB. We're a municipal utility, as you know. We're part of the city of Chattanooga. We were chartered in 1935 as the Electric Power Board of Chattanooga. We have a 5-member board. The board is put in place basically by city government in that the mayor ups a name to the city council. City council votes on that. So that's how the board member gets in place. There's a bit of genius in the charter. And in that, when that charter was put in place in 1935, it named the board as an independent board with sole responsibility for operation of the organization. Now, if you just think about that a little bit, what does that mean? That means we really don't have any politics because we don't answer to anybody other than the board, and obviously the city council and the mayor. We keep fully up to speed on what we do, but it's an independent board. Board makeup today, 5 members. John Foy. John just recently retired from CBL as Chief Financial Officer. Mayor John Kinsey, who you all know. Vicki Gregg, recently retired from Blue Cross Blue Shield as President and CEO. Warren Logan, Executive Director of the Urban League of Chattanooga, and myself. It's a huge privilege for me to serve on this board and to serve with those other 4 members. It's a great board that we enjoy what we do. It's a labor of love. We've got a great management team, and that's why things move pretty well for us. 2007, Benton Lowe was a part of this. The management team came to the board and basically said, we think we should take a hard look at fiber optics and putting a fiber optic systems in place that would fully automate the power delivery system that we have. Never been done before in a whole system such as ours. The management team did a great job of building a business plan. We were convinced it was a good business plan, but we had it double checked by Dr. Benton Lobo. He did a great job for us there, convinced us that we should move forward. Bond issue was put in place in 2008, $230 million, and that took a big gulp because the Power Board at that time, for many years, had no debt whatsoever. And here we were getting ready to go in debt to the tune of $230 million, but we were convinced it was the right thing to do. Now, the ability to do that as an independent board, that's where the genius was, I think. There's not many municipal utilities that would take that leap to put this fiber optic system in place. We did, and when we did it, it was on the basis that, okay, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, and it's going to be available to every person that's in our system. Anybody that has power from EPB is going to have the same ability as far as what fiber optics can give them. We're not going to cherry pick just a business section where we can make a little money. That, again, I think was part of the genius of that decision in 1935 to set the board up as an independent board. So here we are today. To our knowledge, here in Chattanooga, we have the largest fiber optic system in place with the fastest internet speeds available to everyone that's on our system. We have a wonderful relationship with the U.S. Department of Energy, and I hope that some of you are aware, all of you perhaps are aware of that relationship. There's been a good bit of exposure in the paper on that. It's going to mean, I think, a huge potential for Chattanooga in the future. We have people from Oak Ridge National Laboratory right now working with our folks at our control center out at Oak and Greenwood. We're doing things that hopefully will help other utilities put in place the same type of systems that we have that have provided Chattanooga with reliability of power that is really kind of out of sight when you look at what other power companies are doing right now, and it's because of that ability to use interrupters. That's a new name for you, I'm sure. Dave is going to talk a bit about that and show you some of that. But we're delighted that we've been able to put this in place for the people of Chattanooga. We've gone through a transition in management. Many of you knew Harold DePriest. Harold retired last year. One of the questions that the board had to face up to was, okay, do we do a national search to bring in a new CEO, new president and CEO, or do we look inside? Well, that was not a tough question to answer at all. We had worked for several years toward that point in time when we knew Harold would retire. When you looked at what were the requirements for that person that would step into the job, one of the first things that we had to look at was nobody else is doing what EPB does. Nobody else has the fiber optic systems that we have. Nobody has TV, internet, telephone combined with power delivery. So when we looked at that and looked inside, we knew that we had the person in David Wade. David came to EPB in 1983, started in the line crew area, worked his way up. He has been in place now for just about a year, and I would want you to know that the board is extremely pleased in how that transition has gone. We're delighted with it. It's basically been very seamless. Before I bring David on, one other quick thing, and I don't think we've hit the paper with this yet. David got a letter from Secretary Perry of U.S. Department of Energy earlier, I guess it was last week now, and he has been named on the Electricity Committee of the U.S. Department of Energy and will have his first meeting later this week. Now that's quite a nice thing for Chattanooga to have. We are really wired in with DOE. And David, you might want to talk about what that means as far as the research work that we're doing. So David Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll also express my thanks for allowing us to come share with you today a little bit of what's going on at EPB. I'm certainly open to having questions as we go, so if anything comes up that resonates and you've got a question, certainly don't hesitate to ask. You know, sometimes I'll start weird. I found this a few years back, and it was really placed as a sticker on top of light switches back when Edison first started putting electric light in homes in New York. And the thing that I really, a couple of things I really like about it. One is the ideal, when we came into business as an industry, we were replacing the kerosene lantern. You know, nobody really thought about the ideal that electricity was going to be powering computers, or we were going to be using electricity to cool and heat our homes or to keep our food from spoiling. You know, I think that's where we are still in this ideal of communications today. Well, the uses and the value of communications, particularly integrated with electricity is changing. And the things that we started off knowing even back in 2008, we've learned so much more. So I'll share with you a little bit of what kind of who we are and some of the things we've done, but a lot of it I want to talk about where I see things going and how communications and electricity, what we've done in the past, kind of relates to that of where we're going in the future as well as where we've been. When we started off with the idea of how do we modernize our electric system, and we really weren't looking to say we need to do this project and this project and this project. We're saying what does the future electric system look like? And when we said it has the characteristics of being intelligent, interactive, and self-healing, well, those characteristics all required communications that really didn't exist there. You know, there was certainly folks, you could go approach it, you could put in a special communications to talk to radios with crews, you could talk to SCADA with 900 megahertz radios, you could put in something to talk to meters, but the ideal of thinking that is a backbone of where you're going was kind of new. So we started thinking about that. We actually built 3 separate business plans when we started looking at it. One is we built, okay, we put in this fiber network. What does it do for our electric system? So that we built a business plan around that. Then we built a business plan saying, okay, what does this investment do for our community? Dr. Lobo helped us use the M-Plan model to build a thing on what this investment would mean to this community. And at that time, I'm trying, hopefully I can go back that far because he's done a couple since then, and the numbers, I think it was like $300 million over and 2,000 jobs over a 10-year period. I think in the last, about a year ago, he updated his model to say, okay, what did we actually achieve over a 7-year period? And it was in the $900 million, to over $1 billion. And so it's a much very conservative. Then we also looked at, okay, if we offer commercial products, video, voice, and data, can we put that in a model that pays for it? And the answer of those, all 3, were, yes, this makes sense, this is a good decision. So we went to the board, and certainly had a board that is willing to make the tough decisions and do something that was good for the community. You know, if you think about the decision as a board member, that is an incredibly tough decision to go into debt, to issue bonds, to make this big of a step. So I really, we're blessed to have the kind of board that we have at EPB looking out for this community. Today, we've completed our build. This is our service territory, for those of you who don't know. We serve most of Hamilton County and parts of the 9 surrounding counties, but and including some into northwest Georgia. What you see here is just a map that's of all our fiber. Today we have about 9,000 miles of fiber. We have fiber that runs up and down every road, and that's the backbone for both our smart grid and our communications infrastructure. Okay. We're still growing. Actually, I looked this morning and we're well over 93,000. When we started in, this is our customers buying video, voice, and data service from us. When we started, the business plan said we needed 30,000 customers for it to be a solid business plan. Okay, today we're well over 90,000 and we'll continue to grow, I think. So that's one of the things that's happening. And this is a pretty big part of what we knew going into it, is we knew there was some direct value from having the communications available for our electric system, for it to talk to switches, for it to really modernize our electric system. But we also knew that having a second revenue stream would help our electric business as well. The electric we have to keep separate financials for electric and communications by state law. So we deal with them, you know, and you may hear me talk about electric and communications. Internally as a company, we're one company. We operate as one company. We have to keep separate financial divisions, you know, by state law. Our electric system owns the fiber, uses it for all the electric system benefit, and then if any of our customers start buying a communications service from us, they start paying, the communications division pays a access fee to use the fiber. Okay, so our communication basically, you know, effectively leases use of that fiber from our electric system. And our communications division also pays allocated portions of stuff like my salary, you know, and other parts of the business. So this is how much money our communications division is paying to our electric system every year. This past year that ended in July 1, our communications division put $39 million into our electric division. You know, and really we've looked at this pretty hard. Without the communications, without the fiber, we would have 7.5%, 8% higher electric rates today because of this and some other benefits we get out of the fiber. So it's a great investment for our electric business as well. I tend to show this graph because of two reasons. One of them, actually something we're proud of, but also we hear this comment from AT&T and others all the time saying that, well, they have this unfair advantage, they don't pay taxes, and they are correct in the technicality of we don't pay taxes. We pay this thing they call in lieu of taxes, and last year that was almost $20 million we paid to the city, the county, East Ridge, Red Bank, all of the municipals. In fact, we are the largest taxpayer, I guess, that doesn't pay taxes in any of the municipals we serve. But you can see when we started into business back in 2007, we only, I don't know what I did there. We were paying about $9 million a year in taxes. So just by entering into the fiber optic smart grid business, we've added to our tax base of the community about $10 million a year. You know, and it's actually one of the things we're pretty proud of, though, because we don't want to be the kind of organization that's a taking organization. We want to be the kind of organization that gives back to the community, and we're glad to play our role in the community in supporting the tax base as well. Now, I'll talk a little bit about some of the uses of the fiber. When we started putting in the fiber, we knew one of the first things we could do was to improve reliability, because we could put in switches and all of a sudden, instead of folks having to drive to this location, radio back in, somebody look at a map and tell them where to drive to another location, we could put in these advanced switches. They're called interrupters. We put 1,200 of them on our network. So we have 1,200 out of 3,000 miles. Effectively, we're about one every a couple of miles. And these switches basically are talking to each other over their fiber network. If a car hits a pole, these switches will communicate between themselves, and they'll say the problem is between this switch, and those two switches will open up. Then they will close other switches down here to make sure the only folks that are left out are right between those two switches. And so it's very much minimized the impact in the number of outages and the outage duration. Every year we've seen between a 55 and a 65% improvement in number of outages and outage duration because of this level of automation. If you look at the modeling of that, you know, there's all kinds of standards that would say, what's the cost of an outage to our community? You know, it has a cost to us, but the bigger cost is to the community. It's not to us. It's those not being able to manufacture, not being able to process a payment or anything else. And Before this, if you took some of the national studies and just ratioed them down to our area, it would have been around $100 million a year. So if you see a 50%, 55, 65% improvement, you're seeing, 50, 60, $70 million a year in economic impact to this community. So those are some of the real big metrics that I'll share with you. I'm also going to start transitioning and tell you a little bit about some of the things we see going on and how what we've done in the past prepares for that changing future. Video is very much a dynamic place today. In 2007, it was changing, but do you realize when we started in the business in 2007, there was not a video on demand? The folks did not really know what video on demand was. HD was very uncommon. There were only a few HD channels. So the world has changed a lot. Today we're seeing, the advent of 4K coming out, and people are buying more and more 4K TVs. Well, there's not a lot of 4K content. Okay? Now, we were one of the few in the U.S. I think there were 4 companies in the U.S. that broadcast last year's Olympics in 4K. It was AT&T, Comcast, Direct, and EPB. So we're kind of outnumbered in size, but not in capabilities, I will tell you that. We're seeing this shift around what's happening of folks that are migrating to not watching video over a typical video platform to watching it over a new platforms, whether it's looking at streaming it off of Amazon or Hulu or Netflix or those things. Well, and we're seeing folks start to pay more attention to stuff like gaming and how do I use the internet for things that are different. So we're seeing a lot of changes going on around what are people ingesting content for. Now we can talk a lot about the business side of it. I'll talk some about it in a little bit, but the ideal of all of a sudden, instead of having SD that were a 2 meg channel size, a 4K may be 4 times that size today. And the thing that is so important about that is by putting in the fiber, you basically have created this, unlimited amount of bandwidth. So all of a sudden we don't have to really concern ourselves. It actually is a good thing when people start migrating away from lower definition to higher definition, because it's in line with one of the strategic advantages we have, and that's having a big pipe. Trying to continue to push more stuff through a piece of copper that's been out there since the 70s is difficult for some businesses. But when we moved into the business, we thought that we would see folks getting more and more use of this high-speed communication. That's absolutely continuing to happen. This year, I don't know, have any of you heard that there is a esports conference coming to Chattanooga? That any of you know what esports is now? It's computer games that all of a sudden they have collegiate teams that sit at a computer and play computer games. Now they call it esports, and ESPN, I started hearing about this a few months ago, and really? And it's the second biggest sport other than football, is esports. Just flip through ESPN one night and you may be watching an esports game and not know it if you're not careful. I found that out one time on a soccer game. That looks hot, and I started watching, and all of a sudden it's 2 guys sitting there playing a computer game, and it's esports. So it's becoming a bigger and bigger venue of where we're going, places that you didn't expect to go. The electric industry is changing tremendously too, probably more than it's ever changed since we've been in existence. And you're seeing some trends. This is our sales from when we started in business in 1939. And one thing you see is for the last 10, 15 years, our sales have been flat, right? We're not selling more electricity. Things are getting more efficient. This is the U.S. generation across the country. Notice it looks pretty much the same. This is the generation that's around. The only difference you see here is coal is the black. This is by type of generation, by fuel type. Coal is the black one, so you can see we certainly are swapping our coal generation for gas-fired generation across the country. But if you look at the overall shape of the curve, it looks pretty much like what's going on with our usage here in the valley. Okay? So what does that mean? That has some meaning. Not all good, not all bad. You know, there just hasn't been new uses of electricity in the last 15 years. Is that changing? A lot of folks would tell you that we're seeing more and more trends that the electric vehicles are going to end up changing that pretty significantly. You know, if only a quarter of the vehicles shift between using gas to electricity, it's shifting $100 billion annually from the gasoline industry to the electric industry. So that's a pretty big shift in fuel source that will, and then we're seeing that happen more and more. You know, we certainly are partners in making that transition, think it's a pretty good transition. But we're also seeing this notion of not just large generation, but small generation, distributed generation. We're seeing this ideal that somebody can put a generator on their house. You know, solar panels on your house is a generator. Putting a combined heat and power generator at a business. So you're getting this change, and you're seeing an acceleration of it that's projected to continue to accelerate. Well, that's a pretty big change in our industry. If you think about those two things going together, is we have this ideal that we're not using more electricity, okay? That our homes are not using more electricity, they're using less. That all of a sudden we're starting to get new ways to generate electricity that's becoming more feasible and desired. You know, folks are wanting to put solar panels out. Somebody may be wanting to own a combined heat and power generation. So it changes the dynamics of where we are as a industry. So we're in quite a change. You know, we've started putting in some solar panels. We've just 2 months ago opened the ideal of a community solar project, and we're selling and leasing panels out of that for those that don't have the space or don't want to cut the tree down or just don't want to maintain a solar on their own house. They can own a few panels or here. So we're seeing this tremendous shift in what's happening as a industry. We're seeing this notion of we were pretty much a one-way power flow. We operate as industry a lot like a mainframe for 100 years. You know, you had large-scale generation down to meters. Well, it's becoming a whole different notion now. You're seeing the interaction of power that flows a different direction. Power that flows from behind the meter back onto the grid. You're seeing this ideal that generation may be a smaller level down deeper in the network, not just coming from TVA across transmission lines through substations to us. And the thing that's really important about that is what that means is the way we operate, the way we think as an industry has to be different. You know, communication plays a much bigger role when you're talking about having generation of all different sizes throughout a network, as opposed to having generation from TVA just flowing down to us and then to you as end users. You know, the ideal that that same automation that we put in that automatically switches around, we talked about earlier, that saved 50-60% on reliability. All of a sudden now creates these small mini networks and really helps us make that conversion. We didn't know exactly this is where it was going when we started putting that communication in 2007. You know, the industry wasn't quite there yet, but all of a sudden today, the same thing by putting in the switches, by putting in the fiber, the same thing that really allowed us to improve reliability that significantly also gives us the ability to segment our network and to build a two-way network. We're in the process today of working with the DOE, Oak Ridge National Laboratories, to take the solar that's over here at our community solar on Holtzclaw and the solar at the airport and incorporate some batteries in both of those devices, turn it into what's termed a microgrid. That means it'll operate just fine in conjunction with the grid, but it also means that if something happens and we lose power from TVA, that area can be self-supported, it can operate. It means that it looks at what all loads are going on at real time, and it decides how big of an area that can be and opens those interrupter switches or shrinks that size based on what's going on at that point in time to continue to enable folks to enjoy the benefits of electricity. So the world is becoming very much more complicated, but it's very much in line with having communication and automation and establishing that as a direction that's pretty interesting. Yes, sir.
Are we more or less vulnerable to hacking?
Both is the answer. I mean, certainly I think the question was, are we more or less vulnerable to hacking? I think in two ways. In some cases, more, because there are some utilities that have no automation whatsoever. You know, so there's nothing to hack. And I guess that, in a sense, that would be the ultimate way of preventing somebody from hacking something is to have nothing for them to hack. You sacrifice all of the benefits from having that if you do, though. But the fiber is unique in terms of lots of ways. Certainly, it's not. Most of the ways that folks hack is social engineering. I don't know if most of you know that or not, but most of the time, when folks want to get into a network, instead of them trying to technologically get into the network, they're really all about trying to figure out, how do I get you to click on something that looks real so I can put something on your computer? So that's become pretty mainstream. We've had an opportunity to work with the folks at Oak Ridge and with the Department of Energy quite a bit on cybersecurity. And so I think we are on the leading edge of this notion of cybersecurity, working with those folks. We're working with those folks and a group out of the West Coast on using quantum technology as a cybersecurity. And basically over the fiber, they're measuring, what's happening at the photon level on both ends of it to know, did I get the same input I was expecting as an output. So it's really amazing where this whole notion of hacking and cybersecurity is going. It's going to continue to be a bigger and bigger issue for all of us. The thing that is, that I feel pretty comfortable about doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I don't think I can ever tell you that, is the fact that we've got such strong relationships with the folks at Oak Ridge and others that we are on that leading edge of cybersecurity along with them. The other thing that's continuing to happen in our industry and with the communications is this ideal of the Internet of Things. And what all proliferation of gadgets that we have across. Last year, in 2017, this year, we're going to deliver 1 billion gadgets. So whether that's a watch or Alexa, whatever, 1 billion gadgets. Next year we'll add another 1.3 billion to that. So we're continuing to put more and more gadgets in our home, in our businesses. And think about, well, what does that mean? And why do you care about that? Well, we care about it for all kinds of reasons. One is, as a communications provider, we've got to support all these devices. And what does that mean? We start supporting them. The other one is a lot of these devices are related to energy use. You know, whether it's thermostats or controllers or lights that go up and down. So when you put those together and you learn how to manage them correctly, all of a sudden they can be a big asset to the whole and help the whole. And we can be a opportunity to help those in our community. One of the most important things that we've realized through getting into the communications business, and I've talked a lot about just the general technology side of things, but the most important thing we've learned is how important it is to take care of our customers and how important it is to treat our customers the right way and how important how much they value having somebody that's willing to come to their house and help them connect up a device or help them troubleshoot a device or talk to them over the phone. So as we see this increased proliferation of gadgets, we think that even creates a bigger opportunity for us to do even more for the community in many, many ways. Education is a big piece of what's going on with technology over communications and the fiber. If you haven't, I would invite you to look at what's going on with our STEM school. It's been going on for a couple of years. As we've got a professor on the West Coast at the University of Southern California that's teaching a microbiology class here in Chattanooga. They have this electron microscope at USC. They've connected it to video cinematography, and they're streaming it live to the students at the STEM school here in Chattanooga. It's under the control of the STEM students in Chattanooga, so they're operating that microscope, and it is just making a significant difference in what's going on in education and exciting folks on how do you use technology to really take you to that next level. We see a lot more. The last thing I'll mention about is healthcare and the impact of communications on healthcare. You know, you hear a lot on stuff like what does it matter when you have communications? How does it affect healthcare? And we've been in conversations and saw some tests about most of the folks that get sick at school. You know what they do? They get sick at school. They go to the nurse takes their temperature, they call their parents, they come get them, and you know where 80% of them go straight to the emergency room. Okay? And a lot of the high percentage of these don't have insurance. And so there are a couple of companies in town now that are working on this model. They've done a couple of tests about putting the tools in the schools, allowing that communication back to a doctor's office and letting that student leave with a prescription versus leave and go to We're working with a company called Nokia and IBM Watson on a trial of how do you take technology and let it help this idea of aging in place. The ideal when someone's not to the point where they want to move into assisted living, but you need more connections there. So we're working on a couple of pilots there. Lots of things going on, lots of things that really just say that our world's changing a lot. You know, and the ideal of having this fiber network in place has really opened the door for us to be part of that changing world and allowed us to continue to be compete in a world where we're not just looking at can we sell more kilowatt hours. We're looking at how do we have a bigger impact on the community. So I will be glad to take any questions.
So you kind of mentioned a whole bunch of different irons in the fire. I mean, if you kind of had a priority list of like what the biggest focuses or opportunities are? Like, would it be electric vehicles, distributed generation, stuff on the communication side?
Well, actually, all of those are in the fire. We've got to be the world's changing on distributed generation. We put in some solar. We're putting in some batteries. What you'll see there is that's something that's taking place, that we're getting prepared for something that becomes exponential. We're not to that knee of that curve on distributed generation yet, but we're back here in the early stages of that. So the more we invest in distributed generation, the more we understand it, the more the better off we are when we hit that knee of that curve. We're not at the knee yet because the cost is not quite there, but if we're prepared for that knee, we're better off. So that's where I think we are with distributed generation. Something we're very interested in, something that we see, whether it's 3, 5, 7 years down the road where you see that knee. Who has that crystal ball? I don't know.
Is that something that you think EPB would be like the provider of that service, or you're just trying to get the grid ready to be able to handle those?
Both. I think we will. We'll want our customers to have options for us to own the generation. Certainly they have options to own generation at their site. We wouldn't want to take those options away from them. We think competition is actually healthy for all, but we also think, though, that not everybody wants to own those devices and have to maintain them. So that's why we're doing stuff like putting in the community solar, because we certainly have that level of knowledge and understanding. So I think we will want, we see as being an owner and an option in owning some of those devices as well. On the communications side, the video side of our model is changing. It's not going to change overnight, but we're seeing more folks move away from buying a traditional video package to just using Netflix or Hulu. The term's cord cutting. And then there's a group growing up that they would call cord nevers. It's my daughter that's never had a video service, probably never will in her entire life. That one is us learning how to manage something that's folks are going to want for the next 10 plus years, but at a declining market. So we're seeing about a 1% per year decline in video service today. I think that'll accelerate at some point in time, and it'll be a curve that drops the opposite direction. The good thing about that is that with our network, the value comes out of owning the fiber. The more you stream something over the internet, the more bandwidth it consumes, and the less that we have the ability to manage what the network use is. So it's a real advantage for us as that happens. It's a real disadvantage for our competitor, because when I'm broadcasting a bunch of channels to you, I can manage how those channels get to you. If you're grabbing stuff independently, and streaming it through a pipe, then I have a harder time doing that. So I think it becomes more of a strategic advantage for us that that's happening. Video for us is pretty much a break-even proposition. Whatever we collect from our customers buying video, we turn around and pay Hollywood for the content. It is one of the interesting models that they have such control over how many channels we carry, where we place them, what options we provide for video, that as we migrate away from it, I think it's a model that moves in towards our strategy more so, but it's one that don't. So that's kind of what's going. The biggest thing going on with communications is us continuing to provide our customers with the support services that they want for these added devices, provide some of the devices for them at some point in time, and continue to have a big pipe and manage this down turn in video. On the electric vehicles, we're certainly encouraged to see that fuel. That's really one of those few opportunities to use more electricity, swapping from a gasoline fuel to electric fuel. So we'll continue to encourage that. That's not driven by us. It's going to be driven by factors much outside of us. But you're seeing, from Tesla putting in $30,000 vehicles to Volkswagen and others putting a lot of their future investment in electric vehicles. It's something that we need to be prepared for. And I think it's very a good thing for us and for Chattanooga community that it's moving in that direction.
Do you think that might push us to time of use rates? And as people get home from work and plug in this big battery that's trying to suck power at peak power time of day, I mean, is that something you guys have talked about? Or
We have a
put it on a timer and charge it in the middle of the night? Or?
We have a time of use rate. We have 100 customers that want a time of use rate. Mostly folks don't want a time of use rate unless you make it so bad that they have to have it, or you manually force them there. This whole notion, we'll have to really look at what's going on with, I don't think rates will be the same tomorrow as they are today. I don't think time of use is the answer in a purest form, just because nobody wants to have a time of use rate. We really, we have a history as Americans of trading money for comfort and convenience. If you think we're going to flip that around and all of a sudden we want to buy your comfort and convenience back for you, so you have to manage this stuff, I don't think that's where we're headed towards at all. There are some utilities that believe that's exactly where they have to go, is force everybody on time of use rates. There is some change. TVA is talking to us right now. They've given us notice they're going to change how they bill us over the next years. So, and they're looking at more of a model where that's more of our rates will be at a fixed cost, so that they want to take some of the cost out of the kilowatt hour cost and turn it into a fixed cost model.
And that would imply that they would own the battery, or just something that.
Well, it would. Yeah, or it would just guarantee them that amount of revenue, whichever way you want to look at it, I guess, is how you look at those. Now, I think there's the ideal of rates are going to be a pretty interesting question over the next year. We certainly are a little bit different than a lot of the industry. A lot of the industry is thinking about it from the terms of how do I put in a fixed cost, or how do I put in something to lock in my revenue, or how do I put in a time of use that lets you respond to me, because what's important is me. But the problem with that is every bit of that assumes that you have this monopoly and everything is all about the utility. Well, we're really not a monopoly any longer. People do have options and they'll continue to have more. So we're really trying to think through, okay, how do our customers, how do we give them stuff they want to buy from us? How do we build rates of stuff that they're going to want, not how do we penalize them to force them to move into our model? So that's kind of why we're looking at having options of them owning generation, or us owning it, of us owning a battery, putting batteries at your site for backup or whatever. And how do we provide you products that you want to buy for us, and think more like a competitive business than thinking like somebody that says you have to buy from us and we're going to force you to either pay it the same whether you use it or not, or we're going to make it onerous on you to use it when we want you to use it.
I think some of that comes from providing customers with more information in their bill. I know certain states and UK utilities look at unbundling the rates so they can see what's fixed, what's variable, what's related to generation versus the grid. Is that something that EPB looks at, or is that?
We certainly know it. For those of you that haven't, I'll make a plug. We have an app called My EPB, And you can, if you load it and load your credentials on there, you can look at your real-time energy usage. You can just look and see when you used energy yesterday and how much and last week, and you can see if we actually will do stuff like give you a anomaly reporting. That's been one of the best things I think about it is sometimes your heat pump or something can fail at your house. And all of a sudden it fails, and the good thing about having a backup electric heat is it fails, you don't get code. The bad thing about it is the kind of heat it's using is very costly. So when you know it's messed up is when you get a bill that's twice what you thought it was going to be. So, you know, we've put in anomaly reporting, so if it sees something that looks out of whack, it sends you a alert through your app that says, might be fine, but you might want to look. We're certainly looking and look at that information on what generation costs, what transmission costs, stuff all the time, and try to figure out how do we manage that for the best of our customers. And then we're also trying to provide them information on how they use power. I haven't had any customers yet that really have wanted that total visibility, but they may as we move forward.
You mentioned about generating your own solar power, probably wind, whatever. Do you think the day will ever come when EPB will they install its own natural gas generator and then cut itself off to the exit?
Oh, that'd be a hard question for me to stand here and ask, and probably would stir up more if I said either way than I would want to stir up today. You know, nothing is off the table in us preparing for the future is probably the best answer I could give you.
You know, for the electric vehicles, if you get to where, y'all looked at anything where you get to 25% 5 years down the road, and the generation is, you know, is going to be called upon what? Primarily natural gas, I guess, and then the load, everyone comes home at 5:30 to 6 and plugs their vehicle in. I mean, is that something you all can handle? Are there studies that?
We don't see there being any big issues on our network, our distribution network there at all for folks adding electric vehicles to their usage. They use about like an electric water heater, and there'll be some diversity on it too. So don't really think that is a huge issue. You know, if it is, then you end up having some rates that incent people to act a little bit differently. But I don't think from our network perspective that it's something we're concerned about today. Yes, sir.
Question getting back to what you talked about with respect to cybersecurity and working with rich people and stuff. I agree that Internet of Things is a huge attack vector, and you talked about devices and personal service, and I think managing that is going to be a real challenge. But I wanted to ask about securing something that obviously a much more established service or technology, email accounts. Gmail allows for a 100-character maximum limit. As far as I know, EPB has a maximum character limit on passwords of just 12. Did they say anything to you about that? Or?
I haven't had any personal conversation. I'll ask about that. I did not even know that was a constraint, but I bet there's not any issues with expanding that. I don't have a clue. I'll ask, but I'll be glad to get an answer back to you on that one. Yes.
Position on net neutrality.
We absolutely believe in net neutrality. You know, in fact, I sent a comment into the FCC that, you know, the ideal of net neutrality ends up being that we get to choose and to sell your priorities of where you want traffic to go and speed. That's for those of you that are not very familiar with net neutrality. You know, the argument for it is that, you know, as a provider, I could go out and I could basically charge Netflix or, you know, Amazon or anybody, if they're willing to pay me, I could give them priority service over somebody that's not willing to pay me when you go to their website. So we think it's really up to our customers to decide what they want, and not for us to be able to decide what traffic they're going to get the best service at. The good thing about that from our perspective, though, is having the fiber, it really is meaningless in a way. If you invest in a pipe that's big enough, then you don't have the constraints to try to sell who gets priority. If you're still trying to squeeze everything through a piece of copper, all of a sudden, now the question becomes, do I let the individuals, based on where they want to go, have service just based on what they choose to do, or do I manage that by selling off to the highest bidder? As a public entity that's really designed to serve the whole community, we really believe it's up to our customers, and that us prioritizing their traffic is not the right solution.
One more.
Okay. Yes, sir.
How big a threat is 5G cellular to your internet service? They can stream through a phone and create a bubble, light it up, have a home service.
Well, I don't think it is a very big threat at all. 5G is a ways off for becoming a prominent, widespread application. The other thing is, when you start thinking about 5G, one of the things that happens is your area of coverage per antenna shrinks tremendously. So we're probably going to see some 5G antennas around UTC, around the downtown, in some very high densely populated areas. You'll see some antennas unloading their other cellular network, but you're probably never going to see a ubiquitous 5G network across our entire service territory. And then every place there's an antenna, you really need a fiber connection back from that antenna. So I think it actually, I won't say it's never going to change some of the movement, and some people may use just stream over a cellular connection, but I don't think it will solve and take that need away. It'll only provide more applications for the fiber, not less.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much.